Hello, Attorney Mooney.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I see my friends from Hartford here. Hello, Paul.
Hey, Tom, nice to see you.
Yep.
We're having fun with budgets, Tom.
I'm sorry.
I said we're having fun with budgets.
Oh, I know. I know.
Oh, I don't think you've met Caitlin. Caitlin is our new CFO.
Hello, Caitlin. Tom Mooney
Hi,
here.
nice to meet you.
Tom literally wrote the book, Education Law in
Good
Connecticut.
afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Board Member Fortune. How are you?
I am well. I will just have my video off for the remainder of the meeting.
Hello, Board Member Walker.
Hey, how are you? Um, and let's see. Hmm. Wait,
Hello. I'm just messaging Jen to make sure that we get started on time, and just a reminder that we are streaming on YouTube already.
oh, well, good. This is, I would say we
Thank
can't
you.
we can't seem to communicate too much on this particular topic. So
I really missed
I
all of you.
so yeah, yeah, exactly. But understandable because it 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 gives conversation wherever you go. So
Good evening, everyone. I have to pick up my daughter, I believe at like 4:45, but I'll switch over to my phone. But Tyrone, if we're still going along, can you share the meeting? Why am I, thinks I'm like giving a thumbs up. What is this?
It does it automatically now. It's really awful.
Oh, yeah, it's easy.
Thumbs up. Tyrone, when I have to jump off to just go on my cell phone, can you share
host,
from
yeah, you want to like make me the co-host or something like that, or what do you?
I'll just put in the chat that I'm jumping on my phone. So
Yeah.
just in case there's like people raising hands and stuff like that.
Yeah, I got you. You kind of moderate a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Jen, I was
Sounds
under the impression you could self-duplicate when you had to be in multiple places at once
I usually can,
with all the meetings you have.
but today I can't drive. I feel safe driving and looking at people's hands raised. So
so I know we're streaming, we haven't officially started. It's Mr. Mooney's presence because Lori's not able to make today's meeting. Is that this our
I don't know if Lori is making the meeting, but there were questions last time about uh process, board
yes.
responsibility relative to budget. And so reached out to Attorney Mooney, given who Attorney Mooney represents relative to the book of school law
Yes.
and everything else.
Okay. Well, Mr. Mooney, I'm encouraging you to be positive and and think yes. No,
Depends on the question.
I know. Attorneys are often considered as the no can do.
Oh, no, I'm here to help.
Okay.
should we? Oh, am I?
I've messaged most of them, so they should be joining those who can. I know there's a two that cannot tonight, so I think we can get started, and I'm sure they'll join shortly.
Sorry, Christine, I froze for a minute. Are we good to get started? Are you streaming this? or
Yes, I am
recording?
streaming this and yep, and we're good to go. I've been texting board members, so they should be joining shortly.
Okay, all right, great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this April 10th, 2025 special budget meeting for the Hartford Public Schools. I'm glad you joined us. Board members, thank you for being here. Staff, thank you for being here to talk through these continued difficult conversations regarding the 25-26 budget. With that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Torres Rodriguez.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here and or watching. I'm going to start with the presentation just because, right, we want to provide some quickly historical context. If we go to the next slide, as we have been messaging, we started with a $30 million deficit projected for next year, and a lot of engagement with community, or at least a lot of opportunities for engagement, many conversations with you all as our board, thinking about deficit mitigation, legislative advocacy work towards reducing the deficit. And based on projections, that deficit was reduced by about 15.3 million. That number is a little larger than the 13 million initially communicated because there was additional that was reduced in two ways. One, additional positions reduced at the central office, plus additional savings achieved through non-salary expenses. And we've had some deeper dives into some of the changes. That was our previous meeting that we had with you all, and also additional anticipated revenue from the city, right? A $3 million infusion for next year, which then brings the total mitigation to 18.3 million. We discussed with you all our approaches to thinking about the remainder of that deficit. I guess in the absence of any information about additional state funding for next year, we talked about the unaccounted for expenses, and we also talked about thinking that it's fiscally prudent to include a $5 million placeholder based on potential state funding. And so after all of those pieces you see here on the slide, we are still trying to solve for $6.7 million. Into the next slide, this is a high level view of the summary of where the 15.3 come from. I won't go deeply into those, but just, in case anyone plays the video after, just a reminder that the reductions include the central office positions, right? Those 30 positions, the non-personnel expenditures. And so we left the meeting with you as a board giving us feedback toward the list of items that are still unaccounted for in the budget, and asking you to share your thinking and also your prioritization. And so that's really what this conversation is about, how the feedback from you all. And so we can go to the next slide. We're trying to explain how the feedback was interpreted. This shows the results of the survey. There were some very clear moments of consensus among you all, among the board. The most important items to keep were middle school athletics, student success centers, and full service community school lead agency funding. So, right, those are at the top. Then the least important items to keep, there was actually consensus there as well, were buildings and grounds, non-personnel expenses, contracts for Ready CT and CT Rise, central office coaching positions, and AP positions, knowing that AP positions actually was already a decision that you all were very clear about. I think in one of our earlier budget workshops. In the middle of the pack actually were Hope Academy and Opportunity Academy. And so we want to just share with you some ideas for addressing all of those, but specifically those that are in the middle of the pack. So if we go to the next slide, this is a view of, right, the items that we had last time. Now we've moved them in terms of the consensus order. And so what you see, and they're color coded, right, in the previous slide, green, yellow, red. So we see here the green, which are representing the consensus as to most important to keep. So the overview is that we put your items that were most important to keep at the top of the list and are proposing no or only partial reductions to those. We put your items that were least important to keep right at the bottom of the list and are proposing full reductions to all except for the coaches, which we'll discuss the reason why that's still a recommendation, a different recommendation. And we're still we're asking for additional more thinking from you all on Hope Academy and Opportunity Academy, right? Those were the ones in the middle of the pack. All of these items, I just want to remind us all that we still believe that these are what we call high risk reductions. And we also want to remind our community that what the thinking currently is that if there is no additional funding that is identified, then these are the items that we are saying are going to be examined for reduction. And now with this recent level of input based on this, your consensus. And so if we remember that if we get additional funding beyond the $5 million that we have assumed from the state, we can add back these items. That was another thought that we had. We know we're seeking the 6.7 million. Say that, only 2 million come, that we identify 2 million, right? This is a way in which we can say how we can prioritize as we identify funding streams that come in. Go to the next slide, please. Just a deeper, a closer look at the consensus as to the keeping. And so middle school athletics, right, there's no recommendation there. Relative to student support success centers, there is a recommendation for a reduction, and that is because when we look at the funding stream, and this was one of the questions in a meeting, I believe it was Ms. Brody and Board Member Wilson, and the funding stream for some of the schools that get funding here. Oh no, sorry, that I'm not talking about community schools. These are the student success centers. And because already the middle of the pack includes our tier 3, that is our Hope Academy and Opportunity Academy, we felt that keeping some portion of the services delivered through our student success centers makes the most sense. And so you see there that we're saying, instead of fully reducing everything, we're keeping one graduation specialist and one academic interventionist at each site versus having 2 at each site. And then now relative to full service community school agency funding, also proposing a reduction instead of a full elimination because we can leverage grant funds from the North Hartford Ascend pipeline for those specific schools that have the funding, as well as our most recent grant that we have, which is for the full service community schools that serve a specific group of students in South Hartford. And so you see listed there on the table the schools that would have funding. And that would mean that schools like Belize and West Middle would not receive any funding. So that would mean Boys and Girls Club. And then also McDonough and Parkville would not receive funding. And that partner there is Catholic Charities. And then Burns wouldn't receive any funding and the partner there is the Village. So not ideal, right? Because we want to fund everyone, but also knowing that there's been discussion about, what other funding streams can we leverage? And so that's an example there. Chairperson Huckin Hall, I didn't check about process, so is it okay that I go through the entire presentation and then engage in questions? Is that fine? Okay. So if we go to the next slide, middle of the pack, here is some potential thinking, given that while the responses from all of you were in the middle of the pack, there were some that were saying some of you saying this is important, this is an important service for students. And so there are some options here. One is to reduce all Opportunity Academy and keep half of Hope Academy, so that some of the students that perhaps are being serviced by Opportunity Academy, maybe, right, they can be either part of Hope, and because we also need some tier 2 at our high schools, and that is what Hope Academy can give us. And option B could be reducing Opportunity Academy partially and Hope Academy partially. Now, in full transparency, I will say that I did speak to representatives from Opportunity Academy and to ask as to what would a reduction in funding mean. Obviously, it would mean that students, young people, not all of them would get served. However, the feedback was that currently the way their funding model is that it doesn't allow for a reduction. However, they were going to go back and just check in as to whether or not there could be any economies of scale with any reduction. So I'm just sharing that information as is developing, which is why here you see 2 options. And then in the next slide, consensus around reductions. And what we did, what we're showing you here is just to keeping all of it as a full reduction. Buildings and grounds, non-personnel expenses, the contracts for Ready CT and CT Rise, knowing that we're still going to continue to advocate for additional funding, including philanthropy. And then obviously the AP positions, which was something that you all had already discussed, right? To reduce the APs and meaning reduce the position, not necessarily just reduce the amount of money. You all, I think, felt what our walk away was that you all felt very clear that the position had to be reduced for schools with less than 250 students. And so that you see the 3 reductions here. And then last, one more slide. Did we go to the next slide? Oh, the central office. Yes, sorry,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
the coaches. So while there was, I think we would say there was consensus as to you be most willing to reduce the coaches. We are proposing a reduction here. We are proposing reducing by 5. And the thinking here is that we still have a high focus on our instructional priorities, especially around, the new curriculum, right? This is year 1. And the fact that we're really thinking that we are going to have as many staff members come on board for next year and fill positions, and we want to be able to be in a situation that we can provide professional learning for staff. And so that is a recommendation, though it was low in terms of you all saying, let's prioritize this on this list. We are proposing some type of reduction. And so what would be remaining are coaches, 14 coaches to support across all of our schools in the areas of literacy, primarily literacy, some math, and obviously providing support for our teachers around multilingual service delivery given our population. And last but not least, there was conversation last time as to the health clinics. And we didn't include this in in our conversation last time because we still had some wonderings around the funding streams. And so we did have some input in the survey relative to the health clinics, and then we looked at funding, and here's what we found, right? That the total spending is 2.8 million, but the money that comes in is 1 million from state grant and 0.8 is right, just the reimbursements from insurance. That leaves with a $1 million cost, if you will, that we pay for out of our general budget. And so that's the piece that we are recommending for the reduction, not the full 2.8, but the $1 million. And the team is already thinking through ways to partner with, we do have schools of medicine near here, our schools of, specifically around dentistry, for example. And so team will begin to explore if there are partnerships because this all could be billable. So I know that there's a lot that I've said, but we've taken your feedback. And I also want to say that it was very evident in some of your feedback that you don't agree with you wanted to go on the record that you don't agree with these reductions because you believe that they matter to the core work that we're doing, even though these things kind of don't play out in the classroom, which is what we're saying we're going to protect with the proposed budget. But you all felt that these are crucial services and supports for our students. And you did, complete the task, which was to rate. And so I'll pause there to see if you have any questions, either as to the process for arriving at the consensus and how we shared. And then our team is here to answer also any questions you may have. And Attorney Mooney is here also because I know there were questions about what happens relative to taking a vote, asking, for example, the city for additional funding. So turning it back over to you, Chairperson Huckenhall.
Thanks, Superintendent. Mr. Mooney, did you want to talk first, or do you want us to ask questions first?
Well, if I may just understand the context, it's my understanding that these deliberations are to finalize a budget to submit to the city. Is that correct? And the struggle that you're having is that you're projecting revenue far below what you believe to be necessary. And so just to set the stage with the simple observation and then happy to answer questions. At this point, it's the job of the Board of Education to adopt a budget estimate that you submit to the town. That action should be informed by your predictions, but it's not bound by your predictions. You have the right to adopt a budget you think is appropriate to the circumstance, even if you don't know that you're going to get all the money. But once you've adopted a budget, then, as I'm sure you're familiar with the process, it goes to the city, and then the city makes an appropriation. And if the appropriation from the city and the other funds that you're receiving is inadequate to cover the budget estimate that you've submitted to the city, at some later point, it will be required by the Board of Education to make further adjustments and undergo a process which we call reconciliation, where you take your budget estimate and then you see what the final number is, and then you make the appropriate adjustments at that point. I hope that's helpful context. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah,
Mr. Walker. Yeah, Mr. Walker.
yeah. Thank you, Attorney Mooney. This is more of a clarifying question, and I'm also asking this on behalf of Board Member Stephen Tatum, who's not here, but he and I talked earlier. So, because his question was, yeah, can we submit a budget that is quote unquote not in balance? And you seem to indicate that we can.
I would just
But
change the terminology.
I understand.
Yeah.
Right. This is so in essence, we're able to submit what we're going to call a responsible budget that delivers all the services we think are essential. And you're saying that's allowable to do, except that we may be left with reconciliation if somehow everything we propose isn't accepted or funded.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. So the issue of a balanced budget comes at the end of the process. That's the reconciliation process.
Okay.
At this point in the process, you are to estimate what you need to operate the Hartford Public Schools for the coming fiscal year. And as I said, it's appropriate certainly to be informed by your predictions and projections in terms of revenue. But those projections are not binding upon the board at this point in the process.
Okay. Now, yeah, thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to repeat it so that it's captured. Um, and I'll yield the floor at this point for the others.
Can I ask Mr. Moody, when you say it becomes binding at a later point, what is that later point that you're talking about?
Yes, well, the law contemplates that the Board of Education will expend funds through appropriation and otherwise received, but not incur a deficit for any given fiscal year. And so at this point in the process, you don't know for sure how much money you're going to have for 25, 26. You're preparing an estimate of what you think is necessary. You're asking for the money. The binding part comes once you know what the final number is. And then it's I believe legally required that the board start the fiscal year having made the necessary adjustments so that you start the year knowing what your expenses will be, knowing what your revenue will be, and that's where you want to make sure that those two numbers match or are otherwise known as a balanced budget. But that comes when you know the final number.
Mrs. Strata Perez.
You for that. It wants for information, and I apologize about my camera. I don't seem to be able to get it to work, even though I just used it. My question for you is, it sounds like then the balancing comes at the end of this process. That was very clear. So when we submit the budget this time with whatever number, let's say it's the number is with a little bit more than we say this is what we need, and then they have a chance to meet us through that process. That's essentially our request, because our request is by submitting the amount that we need. That's the official request for the legislature to appropriate more funds, and then they get to reply, and then we go through the process of our reconciliation where we get to the point where we have to get to the balanced budget. Is that right?
That's a good summary.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, Superintendent.
Attorney Mooney, so this is board responsibility. How about superintendent responsibility in terms of presenting a budget to the board that documents how much we believe is going to cost to operate the district, and a way to get at a balanced budget if no other funding comes in. Like I've always been under the impression that it is my job to kind of forecast to the board, if we don't get all of the money, this is what lives outside these items, which we just discussed. These items live outside of the prioritized core, if you will.
Yes, I see your responsibility as superintendent in the first instance being something that's ongoing right now. You've helped the board understand where the expenditure issues are. You've identified priorities, and somewhere along that continuum, after receiving your recommended budget, the board has the duty to adopt a budget, and the statute refers to this as the itemized budget estimate. That is what you are required to submit to the city. And then the city will make its appropriation, and you'll know what funds are otherwise available. And then as superintendent, you would be responsible for advising the board as to what the different items are, your view of the priorities, and the board would take that recommendation into account, but ultimately the board would be responsible for adopting the final budget for the 25-26 fiscal year.
Ms. Brody?
Hello, I apologize if you hear my background. I'm trying to be a supportive parent and a good board member at the same time. So, is it informal or formal? The request from the board, as to what we want to see in the budget, like to the superintendent. How does that part work? If we're presented a budget that does like the items that were just shown, are we able to say we want those items included in the budget now that we fully understand the reconciling that happens later on?
Yes, that's your right as a board to consider all the information. There is a formality here, and that formality is that by statute, you will adopt a proposed budget and submit that to the city. And that's a formal action that the board must make. And you'll do that after considering the different elements of expenditure that the superintendent has shared with you and deliberating as a board over your priorities and what you want to present to the city as what you believe to be a fair estimate of the cost of operating the Hartford Public Schools for the coming fiscal year.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry?
I have a follow up.
Oh,
Through the chair. So does that request to the superintendent, can that be in an informal outside of a meeting request, or does it have to be in the public view at a public meeting? As far as what we want to see in the budget, because we would need that presented to us to adopt it.
would you like me to address that? The discussions can be informal. The discussions can take place here, but ultimately you have before you a proposed budget. And you as a board should discuss among yourselves at a public meeting your deliberation on what changes you want to make before that budget estimate is submitted to the city. And it would be through a meeting such as this that each board member would be heard in terms of how you want that budget to be modified. And any board member at any time would be free to make a motion to modify the budget to restore a particular item. And then the board would consider that and vote on it. I would say it's a iterative process where you start somewhere and then you as board members identify how you would propose to change the budget, and then those proposals would be presented for the full board to deliberate on and then ultimately take action on. And given the complexity of your budget, I think it would have to be done, piece by piece, starting from the superintendent's proposed budget.
Thank you for that. And I hope, my board members that we have our thinking caps on and we're looking to make that, motion, today. Thank you, Mr. Mooney.
You're welcome.
Mr. Walker?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wanted to comment on the budget priorities that were presented. Is this the appropriate time to talk about that? Superintendent, yeah, I appreciate the alignment that you and I'm going to say CFO Richard pulled together and presented. I would request one change, though. I think you had that Ready CT and Rise. My request would be to at least pull that towards the middle. That particular program affects students directly in school, and we talked about wanting to offer more career options and certifications to students, and I know CT, Ready CT is one of the organizers and the providers of the opportunities and trainings for young people to get the certifications that will be helpful to them. And so I am hesitant for that to be like totally lost. And so I don't know in this case if a motion needs to be made, or it just I'm giving that feedback if we're looking at how to move money around and whatnot. That would be the one area that I would want to see lifted up. The other thing, if you have, I can, as you have proposed them, I am okay to live with the other proposals as you have prioritized them. And I'll end there. But I will say at the end, it also seems like now there's a possibility for us to take this entire $6.7 million and have it into what we call our responsible budget that we're proposing to the city. But we'll still have to have this in our back pocket of how we rationalize and prioritize this if we don't actually get all these funds.
Yes, just want to respond to Mr. Walker. It is actually it's a little lower in terms of consensus because the overall ranking, there was an overwhelming majority of you all that said those should be the least prioritized. So while I understand what you're saying, based on Attorney Mooney's feedback that, right, any board member can say, let's move it. I'm only reflecting back the process and how we got at the prioritization. And so the other thing that I wanted to reflect on at the moment is hearing Attorney Mooney speak about the process. And I wanted to clarify that what he was explaining is the process that we have been engaging in, right? We engage community. I came in after, working with the team and saying, here's our budget, here's our deficit, right? And we've been working through for 5 months now on the process. And we're down to having a budget that with this list of 6.7 of unaccounted items would be what we believe is the cost of operating the district. And I just want to ask a question to Attorney Mooney. Does it then mean that in its totality, with the 6.7 of unaccounted, that is what the board the board approves as the itemized expenses that goes to the city as like the first step.
If the board decision is that the funds that you need include the 6.7 million that you so far cannot project that you'll receive, if it's the board's decision that those items that compose the $6.7 million figure are necessary items, appropriate items for expenditure, then the board should adopt a budget that includes those items for submission to the city with your fingers crossed and hoping for the best.
That is super helpful, given that I don't think we've had that conversation. The board has not had that conversation. I have been operating under the premise that the budget that we've developed was a leveled service budget, meaning we're trying to maintain services that are being provided this year into next year. I think I'm just thinking out loud, but it was very clear the way you just explained. And I guess that would be a question back to the board at some point as to whether you all have to determine if everything that is on that list is what you all also believe that should be included in the budget.
Deputy Foster?
I just wanted to offer an important clarification, I think, in this, because it makes sense we're talking about this, like, is this 6.7 million part of what we think is essential for running the Hartford Public Schools for next year? But the important clarification goes back to one of our slides where we shared our mitigation thus far. And I want to just make sure everybody remembers that our mitigation thus far includes an assumption of an additional 5 million in support from the state. That is not promised or guaranteed to us at this time. And so I just want to be clear that from a technical perspective, our budget is currently $11.7 million out of balance. It is the 5 million we've assumed as additional state money, plus the 6.7 million you're looking at tonight. So I just want to be really transparent about that, because depending on the decisions of the board, if we were to go forward without reducing anything from the list of 6.7 that we're talking about tonight, how that's gonna look to the city is us saying we are 11.7 million short of what we need to run the district.
Mr. Wilson? He raises his hand again. I'll grab him. If I could really
Nope,
quick.
sorry. I was
Oh,
talking
sorry,
on
there you
mute.
are. Go ahead.
I was talking on mute. Before I answered my question a bit, but I don't mean to speak for the entire board, but I think or at least let me speak for myself. We're in a two-part situation. We know what we need to run the district. I hesitate to say phectively, because it's more than that, but more than the 11. But if this phase, at this phase, we're requesting the funds from the city, from the city. I don't think there would be an issue with. I would hope that all of the board members would support submitting a budget that encompasses everything that we need. And then what are we talking about? And this is my clarification question. Are we talking about coming back, in June, end of May, to reconcile what the city's budget, I believe what's that, May 7th? They're supposed to vote on the city budget. Is that correct? So we would come back at the end of May or June board meeting to vote on the final budget?
If I may, Chairperson, two things to think about. That's one, when the city does in May approve, but we also remember that we are also anticipating answers relative to the state funding as well. And I believe we won't know for sure until June on the state budget. But Attorney Mooney, I understand that it is on or before June 30th that action has to be taken by the board, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. I just would offer the observation that these are difficult decisions, and once you know how much money the board has, you certainly don't want to wait until the very end of June, but rather the sooner you can come to grips with the reality and do that reconciliation, the more effectively the administration can move forward to implement those budgetary changes.
Puts us in a bad spot. Last minute, we don't know what we're getting from the state. We don't know what we're getting for the city. And in a month's time. Okay. No, sorry. I didn't mean to just speak out.
No, you're fine. Did you want to finish your thought, Mr. Wilson?
No, I was thinking out loud. I'm fine.
No, it's okay. Yeah, real quick, Mr. Walker and Mrs. Rada Perez, before we jump in, I just wanted to just kind of echo what Mr. Mooney was just saying about, the budget really is kind of the vehicle in which people can make decisions. And so my fear, if we wait to really implement any of these changes, is that our partners don't know what they're doing. We've got staff that may or may not know what they're doing. So I feel like we've talked to the city, we've talked to the state, we've had so many conversations over the last 5 months with every person I think that has anything to do with funding the schools recently, and there are more meetings to come. I would be concerned about submitting a budget or proposing a budget that we aren't comfortable that we'll be able to fund before June, because a lot of folks then won't know what they're doing. I feel like it's better going the other way. We say we're going to tell the world this is what we're cutting, right? We're not hiding that. We're not saying, well, we'll come up with a plan later, right? They know what's on the chopping block right now. I'd also like to say that, while there's things that are less prioritized on that list by the board, nothing on there is not important to the board. And I want to be sure to say that out loud so that everyone knows that we are not thinking that anything is less than. They're all very incredibly hard decisions. So I just wanted to throw that out there really quick. Mr. Walker, if you can take over chairing the meeting, I'm going to jump on my phone and drive to pick up my child, but I will still be on. So thank you everyone, and I'll be back shortly.
Thank you, Chair. Let me complete a comment then before, I guess, sitting in the chair role. In that last year we went through a similar process, and money came late in the process. So it's unpredictable flows of money happen, and so what I'm saying is the budget should reflect our values too. And so I agree that we should talk to folks. If we're thinking we may not be able to fund you next year, we can have that honest conversation. But in response to that conversation, the feedback I've seemingly have received is one that says to fight for it. And so part of including, in my mind, the 6.7 in a budget would be in some ways to try to assert our interest in getting those extra funds. It doesn't mean we don't tell folks, hey, if we don't get it, then you will be cut. I don't think we hide the truth, but to me to cut prematurely would be not to give any of our funders any opportunity to give us what we're requesting, what we need. With that, I will, I guess, recognize Board Member Estrada Perez.
Thank you so much. Mr. Mooney, I guess this question is for you, or it says, I wrote it down because I want to make sure I get it right. I heard earlier about there's a prediction that state funds are going to come through. And so these cuts our budget proposal includes the prediction that we're going to get those $5 million. If it doesn't come through true, and we ask for these $6 million from the city, for example, my question is, do the funds have to be specific to that line item? For example, if the state money doesn't come through, can it be reallocated to other necessary, we know that because we know we need more than 6.7 million. We just know that we've done so much cutting already of the millions that we had to take down, that it's worth fighting for the 6.7 million, right? It sounds like. But we also want to make sure that if the state funds don't come through, is it specific to those line items, or can they be moved as is needed, based on what we know after the state's decision?
Once you know your final number, you're free to reallocate funds from one line item to the other. And in fact, the statute contemplates that even during the year, the board is free to make line item transfers so that you continually project that you're going to be in balance for the year. But through this process, to answer your question directly, that's perfectly appropriate to move things around as you struggle to come up with a budget that is balanced at the end of the process, after you know what the money is.
The superintendent.
Yeah, I wanted to just acknowledge about the money, the $5 million that we did get last year, later into the process. And very grateful that we received the money. And we are now in a situation in which that $5 million that's a placeholder is really attached to the money that we got last year. And we were told very clearly, there's no guarantee, right, for the next year. So that's the reality that we have to keep in mind. And then the question, I guess, in the moment for Attorney Mooney, and let me explain first the tension that exists for me, I think, is that we are not in a labor market that is on our side, essentially, right? Even though we do have a new teacher contract that I'm so excited about, we still know that we are not among the highest paid, the highest paid relative to this teacher salary. And we are the district with the largest number of vacancies. And so there is an overabundance of competition for for staffing. And so we have been in situations in the past, right, in which that has been a deterrent for some staff members that see that we don't have a budget, and that for some reason creates a level of anxiety in them, saying, well, they don't have a budget, I'm afraid. And the offers that we make to people would say contingent upon budget adoption, because we're not sure that we have the money. Like, is that the message, Attorney Mooney?
I hope not. It's a very competitive market, and I think as you go through the budget process, some offers you're going to say unequivocally, irrespective of how much money you have, this position will go forward. And wherever you can say that, you will want to say that. The budget uncertainties are clearly a burden as you seek to attract staff to the Hartford Public Schools. So the sooner you get through this process and know what you're dealing with, so that you can say unequivocally, this is an offer, the better.
Thank you.
Board Member Tatum.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Just sort of building off of that concern, I guess I struggle to see how that process is any more destabilizing than cutting positions, like adopting a lower budget with more cuts, cutting those positions sooner, and then trying to rehire people back on after the fact if those funds do come through. I can see some argument that that's at least more certain for the people that are getting those offers. But I think that we experienced last year the destabilizing effects of passing a more conservative budget before we realized some additional revenue, and that was also destabilizing in terms of staffing and people's perception of the sort of fiscal health of the district, I guess. And I just wonder if the message of we are aggressively targeting more funds by passing a more ambitious budget would not send a message to staff that would be somewhat reassuring. Just a sort of counterpoint, I guess, to consider as we think about this.
Board Member Estrada Perez.
Thank you. I guess my question is, recognizing that this is all based on process and timeline and deadlines, and we're definitely leaning to like a deadline where all things have to be done. I'm thinking about like, it could be a space where they could answer us faster, but I don't know. And by that, I mean the city council or like the mayor's office or what is the timeline? Like if we were to submit the budget, say that had the $6.7 million attached to it, when reasonably would we hear back? Like, is there a timeline from when we would hear back from the other bodies of government about when, and we like when they would have to respond to us by? Or no?
Board Member
I
Warren.
heard that May 9th is the time that the city is going to act on the budget. These deadlines are typically driven by charter, and you have a budget submission date, and you're working against that date. I don't know what it is, but you'll meet that date, you'll submit your budget, and then per charter, the city will make its appropriation, and then you'll know. It may be that the superintendent has those dates.
Yeah, Superintendent.
Yes, the date is April 23rd for the presenting to the city council.
Thank you. Board Member Brody.
Yes, so I would like to make a motion that the budget that's presented to us on Tuesday to vote on encompasses the services needed that as a reason that encompasses the 6.7 million.
There's a motion. Let me, I guess I have a process question. Are we able to entertain motions
We
at
got
this
that
moment?
answer, Mr. Chair. We got that answer from Mr. Mooney earlier.
Oh. So, that being said, then I believe there is a formal motion on the table, so to speak. And so is there a second for this motion?
I'll second the motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Board Member Tatum has seconded the motion. I may just a process question. Ms. Santiago, are you keeping notes of this in this moment?
Yes, I am.
All right, thank you. Board Member Estrada Perez. Board Member Estrada Perez, did you have a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute and I did not realize that. I have a question. So, because I think we've taken a both-hand approach. There is the budget. I think we've done both of the things we need to do. I think we've already articulated when we get to the reconciliation part, what the budget ultimately will look like if we don't get more dollars. So I think we've done that in terms of like what we'll need at the end of it, right? And we also have the budget with the 6.7 million. So I think at the end of the reconciliation process, we know what it's going to look like. We have that right now. We've talked through it. So we have that ready to go should we need to use it. However, now that we have the motions and has passed to be able to submit the 6.7 million, I say this to say that I think I'm glad that it's good that we've taken this step because it also looks like we've done both and we've talked through what those cuts actually look like and then what it could look like to have maybe an infusion that we may not know about, right? But might be worth to ask, right? And so I think it makes sense because it seems like we've done both.
Yeah, I thank you, Board Member Estrada Perez. but to clarify where we are in the process, we have a motion from Board Member Brody, and it's been seconded by Board Member Tatum. And that motion, I'm going to summarize it really briefly. I may not have it correct. Is that the motion is to authorize adding the additional $6.7 million proposed to the budget that's presented to the board. And so I see this motion as providing some direction to the superintendent. But to be clear, that motion has not been approved yet. So we're in the discussion of the motion. So I just want to be clear to direct your comments to that motion that's on the tape.
Oh, I understand. I can report back. So I guess I'm supportive of the motion to be able to at least ask for the amount. But it sounds like we then take this to the process question. Then we take this to the Tuesday vote. Is that what it is? No.
To be clear, at some point right here in this meeting, when discussion ends, and I'll put the question, if we're in with this, if we are done with discussion, I will have Board Member Brody re-articulate the motion, and we will all vote in this meeting right now to approve this motion. And this motion will then provide direction to the superintendent and the CFO as to what to present to us next Tuesday.
That is a very helpful breakdown. Thank you.
The motion is to include all the necessary categories that were identified today that add up to 6.7 million, for that to be in the budget that's presented to us on Tuesday for our budget vote.
Thank you, Board Member Brody. So I guess I'll ask now, is there further discussion on the motion?
I'm not sure what my role is, Board Member Walker, because I'm not a board member, but how do I seek clarity on what the motion entails?
Mr. Chair? So we're in the middle of a motion. So the motion on the floor, and I'll repeat it again, that the budget that we're presented to vote on Tuesday, that it's in that budget and it has all the categories we had to prioritize, right? We had to prioritize OPP and middle school. So all of those things that added up to 6.7 million, for those to be included in the budget that you present to the board on Tuesday.
Can I get?
Yeah, just a second. Superintendent, does that clarify your question?
Let me ask, yes, and everything that some of the items on the 6.7 were already decided by the board for reduction. So I just want to make sure that we're still saying, regardless of that, still include them. For example, the 250 APs, right? Oh, you're saying regardless of what has been decided before already, bring them all. Yes?
Correct. But we're a little out of order because I made the motion and it didn't get seconded. So we didn't go to discussion. Were we starting over, Mr. Chair, as far as the motion being made and seconded? You were just asking for clarification?
Correct. Your motion's on the table.
So we were still in discussion. It was moved by me and seconded by Stephen Tatum. Is that correct?
Correct. And you just
so we're still in discussion mode. Yes.
Correct. Yes. And you were helpful to just clarify it so everyone is making sure they're on the same page with you. And let me recognize Board Member Wilson.
Thank you. Just so I'm in total understanding, we will be requesting the additional 6.5. In the original budget, that we would have been sending to the city, did it include the $5 million placeholder from the state? Because if it didn't, then I would ask that the motion be changed to include that additional 5 million.
I motion from Board Member Wilson. Is there a second for that amendment to the motion?
He didn't make a point of order, Mr. Chair. So he's not making an amendment. He's asking for understanding before he makes an amendment.
Oh, is
request. Yeah, before he requests an amendment to the motion, he's getting clarity on what Tuesday would it have included that placeholder for 5 million from the state. Would that budget have had included that?
Thank you very much, Board Member Brody. She's just on top of this. So in that case, CFO Richard, can you give an answer to that question?
From what I was understanding, and this can be a point of clarity, what we would bring to the board based on the motion next Tuesday is a budget that would include the assumption of the 5 million in additional state funding, and would include the 6.7 million additional we have not mitigated. And so another way of saying that is our budget would be out of balance by 6.7 million. What we would be bringing the city then on the 23rd when we present is, if that budget were to be voted, is our budget is out of balance 6.7 million beyond all the other assumptions we've made. We're requesting that from you on top of the 3 million that you've already given us one time. And then we're seeing how they respond to that. So that was my understanding of the motion, was we would still have a placeholder for state funding of 5 million. However, there could be a different motion that says, take out that assumption of state funding and ask the city for the 11.7 million instead. So I think those are two different scenarios. And I had heard the first, keep all the assumptions we have, just don't reduce the 6.7, was what I first understood.
Thank you, CFO Richard. That also aligns with what I heard as well. Board Member Tatum. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on a second.
You're on mute.
Board Member Wilson, I'm sorry. Did that clarification answer your question?
Yeah, but let me make sure I'm understanding correctly. We are going to be requesting essentially $9 million plus from the city, because the 3 million that they gave us last year isn't guaranteed this year. So in addition to the 3 million they're giving us last year, we're going to be requesting an additional 6 plus million. So now we have 9 plus million, but that's also under the assumption that we're going to get $5 million from the state. To which, if we don't, then we're sort of back into if we get the additional 9 from the city, we're still back in the same place we were sort of now, in that if we don't get from the state, where we sort of need an additional 5 million, or we have to cut programs. So I'm asking, so I guess somebody can show me how. I would like to make to change the motion on the floor to ask for the entire amount.
Okay, well, let's clarify the first thing you have said. The city has already promised 3. That's what, so CFO Richard was saying the city has already promised an additional 3. If we go forward with this budget that has an additional 6.7, then we would be asking the city to potentially fund an additional 6.7 on top of the 3 that they already have promised.
The 9.
Okay.
Yep.
And then that 6 and that 6.7 and 3 would equal 9.7, but they've already promised a 3.
Okay.
And
so the 3 is guaranteed. Understood.
Right. And to be clear, right, this budget goes to the city and indirectly to the state. And so one of the reasons the $5 million will stay in the budget from the state is because, in essence, the budget has to go through the state as well. And so we're in essence asking the state for additional funding, in the budget too. And I will stop there because
I understand. So no, I do not need to make an edit.
Okay,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
that's why I want to be clear. Okay, thank you. Yeah, was there superintendent? I think you wanted to comment.
Yeah, I think I need clarity, and then I know Attorney Mooney was trying to jump in here. So I just want to make sure that we understand that a total of $11.7 million at the moment in revenue is missing.
Yep.
5 million. We're saying, hey, state, we're making an assumption that we're going to get at least 5 million. And then it's the 6.7 that we're saying, hey, city, we don't have it. Total of 11.7. So we're saying it's not the city that we're waiting for 11.7. We're separating those two. Because there could be a situation in which the state does not come through with the 5 million.
Right.
Okay. I thought that's what you were referring to.
Yeah, that is what I was referring to. When Co-Chair Walker was explaining, I thought he's saying, hey, listen, the budget that we are presenting is also the budget that's going to eventually get presented to the state. But if we're only asking, is the city going to be including that 5 million in the request for Hartford's budget if the assumption is only on our end that we're going to get it back? So I'm a little confused on that. My concern is we request directly from the city the entire 11.7. Yes, we are assuming much of that is coming from the 5 million, but let the city reconcile that with the state and not leave that sort of as a separate request, if that makes sense.
Yes, I want to recognize more speakers, but
I'll sit.
If I can just say one thing to you, I guess board member Wilson, and I guess those who's listening, all budgets will have assumptions in them, and so ours will as well. And as I'm understanding it from Attorney Mooney, it is the reconciliation process in which we will get a finalized, here's the actual amount of money that you have. And at that reconciliation point, we will then have to make all of the services and the funds available balance out. So I don't think it's unfair to have an assumption in the budget, but be prepared in reconciliation to address the fact that if it doesn't come, then we will be left with that work to do.
Well,
Let me
I would ask because of the importance of that 5 million that we included in directly asking the city for it.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. Let me stop. Remember Wilson, I would, I guess, need you to, well, let me stop. Ask Attorney Mooney, because you're trying to jump in there.
There's
You may be
still a
trying to
motion on
help
the
us.
floor, Mr. Chair. There's a motion on the floor.
I understand, and I think there's an attempt to add an additional element to the emotion. So, Attorney Mooney, did you want to
Yes.
chime in on this?
Yeah, I know there's a motion on the floor, and I just wanted to offer the observation that the motion does not include where you get the money. The motion is to present a budget that you estimate is necessary in order to fund the Hartford Public Schools. So that in the background on that motion are presumptions that the state's going to do X and the city's going to do Y. But your job at this point is simply to adopt a budget. And I understood the motion to be the board would like to see a budget for Tuesday that would restore the different programs that compose the $6.7 million in projected shortfall. If the board adopts that budget, then that's the budget that will go to the city in accordance with charter as your itemized budget estimate for the cost of operating the Hartford Public Schools. And then the city will consider that request. The city will consider revenue projections that it has from the state. And as the city will then pursuant to charter, make an appropriation. But I don't think that the task before you right now requires that you pin down what your projected revenue sources will be.
Thank you, Attorney Mooney. That's very helpful, and I hope the board heard that, because I too believe that we can't resolve it tonight. I will recognize Chairperson Hakanal.
Thanks, Mr. Walker, and thank you for chairing this while I'm driving. I just wanted to clarify too that when we vote on the budget on Tuesday, we're calling this the proposed budget like this. So we're not adopting a final budget on Tuesday then. Is that what I'm understanding? This is the proposed budget, and because there are still outstanding revenue, kind of some of the revenue is up in the air, then that will make us go back in May to revote on it when we have more answers on the revenue. Is that what we're saying? Because I'm not personally in favor of sending a budget forward to the city council that is not in balance. But if, maybe it's terminology that I'm hung up on.
Let me have Attorney Mooney again add clarification to what we call that initial budget.
Yeah, that would be your itemized budget estimate. You would take a final vote on what your estimate is, and you submit that. And I'm using the term that's used in the statute. So the vote on Tuesday would be to adopt a budget that reflects your itemized budget estimate for the cost of operating the schools. And that budget would then be considered by the town on the city in making its appropriation to you, which would take into account its assessment of what funding will come from the state. But it will be a vote. It will be a final decision, but it will be to submit an estimate to the town. So we use the word proposed and such, but the statute talks about presenting an itemized budget estimate, which in its totality are the funds you believe are necessary to operate the Hartford Public Schools.
I'm going to recognize Board Member Tatum, but if I can take a privilege for a moment to I think, Attorney Mooney, I take your reading of the statute is when we pass this budget on Tuesday, the reason it's an estimate is that we don't really have final numbers of funding we want to get from the state and the city. So I want to offer then technically we're not out of balance because we don't really have final numbers of city and state funds. Is that correct?
That's the essential point I'm making. That is the essential point. You can't be out of balance because you don't know what the revenue side is. You're just saying this is the budget we're proposing, or this is our itemized budget estimate for the coming school year. And then later in the process, you'll know what the funds available are, and you'll have to engage in that process of reconciliation if the funds don't come in to cover the entire amount of your itemized budget estimate.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to get them on the table so that everyone on the board is comfortable that whatever we present on Tuesday is not in or out of budget because we technically don't have final funds yet. Board Member Tatum.
Yeah, this understanding jives very much with how I have understood the process, in part because we as a Board of Education have no authority over how the city spends its money. We can only make, as the statute says, and as Mr. Moody has rearticulated, we can make an estimate of what it will cost. We share that with the city and its city council and the mayor, who have the authority to determine how the city is spending its money. And it's entirely within their right to come back with us with what they will actually appropriate for us. And then, then we have the reconciliation work to do, which I think we are well prepared for. To someone earlier said that we've been having all those tough discussions about should funds not come through, what would we need to do? But I, again, am in favor of submitting to the city a version of our budget that includes the programs that we do not currently have funding for, because in our estimation, they are essential to the functioning of Harper Public Schools.
Thank you. Now, to be fair to board member Brody, I'll let one or two of these conversations go to the left and the right to help us understand the process a little bit better. But ultimately, our responsibility in the moment is to eventually vote on board member Brody's proposal to incorporate the line items that are incorporate the $6.7 million into the budget. So I just want to let everyone know that's really what we're trying to get to, so that our discussion should target back to that, so we can make that decision soon. Board member Fortune. You're muted, board member Fortune. Board member Fortune,
Have you called? Oh, yes,
Oh,
I do have my hand up.
yes.
Before, I guess I have a prequel to my actual question. Attorney Mooney, we are fiduciaries, right? Like our standard of duty is that of a fiduciary, or is it something slightly lower?
In this context, you're a fiduciary to appropriately expend the appropriation that you receive. But you're also agents of the state to recommend what you think you need. So I don't think I don't think the role of the board as a fiduciary is part of this conversation, because that comes when you have received your appropriation and are implementing a budget.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that distinction. I ask because I do feel that knowing we need those funds to run the schools, we essentially are leaving the possibility of obtaining additional funds if we don't put those placeholders in the budget. I think we have, in my view, a bit of a moral obligation to put those placeholders in the budget, because the worst that happens is we don't get them, and we're back to the same position that we would be in if we didn't put it in at all. And the best case scenario is we will get the money because we ask for it, because we'll have more time to explain and advocate what we're really cutting, that they are essential services. So I can't say it emphatically enough. I am strongly in favor of having those placeholders in the budget that we vote on April 15th for the full $11.7 million.
Thank you, board member Fortune. So I'll take the opportunity to ask whether there further discussion, or if we're ready to vote on the proposal as stated. Seeing no questions, board member Brody, would you repeat your proposal a second time, please?
A third, fourth time.
Well, yeah, just
Excuse, I'm just saying I'm outside, so excuse if screaming happens. I'm at a track.
Oh, okay.
So the motion is for the superintendent to present to us, the board, a budget that encompasses all the services that we deem necessary to run our school system. It includes the 6.7 million that was identified tonight as our shortfall. The 6.7 that would initially be absent from Tuesday budget, we're asking for those services to be included in the Tuesday budget.
Okay, that motion has been articulated and repeated several times. So I'll put it out for a vote. All in favor of the amendment as stated, signify by saying aye. Raise your hand. Aye, if something.
Aye.
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 Okay. Any nays?
Nay.
It's one nay. Any abstentions? I realize I'm a member too, so I will register a yes. And so I will state that the amendment has passed. And I will say, in the midst of this, superintendent, you tried to mention that there were a couple of those items of the $6.7 million that the board had previously decided to accept the reduction. And so even though you've been directed to put them back into the budget, I would invite you maybe at or before next Tuesday's meeting to maybe remind us, because we can still agree to remove some certain line items, individually from the budget. If that, yeah, is that
I was just mirroring back
do
information, right?
correct?
Decision points from before that.
So not to muddy it up, the proposal was to add them all in. I would invite you between now and Tuesday to remind the board of maybe the one or two line items that we have already decided that, oh yeah, that one particular one we said we were going to accept, or that other particular one that we said we were going to accept. So just to remind the board, because we do maybe need to be reminded of our prior decisions, because in the moment, we may not remember them all.
And that
But
was
the action right now is to put all of them back. As far as that's what the amendment said. That's I wanted it to be stated and restated, so it's really clear what's being requested.
Yeah, and that was just an example. And the essence, the backdrop of the question is, right, we have informed, right, the SGCs, school principals have had conversations about proposed reductions. So those conversations will continue, right, until we are, including the 6.7, right? We're moving forward with the itemized budget that we're saying is what we believe costs to run the district, with a potential outcome that the money does not come. Right. So on our end, from a management side perspective, we still continue to move forward with proposed reductions, informing people, and all of that.
That is my understanding,
Yes.
Attorney Mooney. That is my understanding as you've expressed it to us today. The Tuesday budget is an estimate, and while on the other hand, we still have to be prepared for reconciliation if that is, to come. Correct.
Correct.
So yes, Superintendent, I think we will need to continue to do all the mitigation activities in preparation for the reconciliation.
Yes, just wanted to, kind of verbalize it out that we're moving forward with letting those that might be impacted by all of the line items that are going to be presented, inclusive of the 6.7.
Now, beyond this amendment and the amendment's passed, we know that's this action. Are there other actions for this meeting? Because I think this meeting's purpose was just to talk about this mitigation. Have we adequately discussed the mitigation and our plan forward? It appears we have. I don't see other hands. Superintendent, well, if you're going to say something, yes.
Yes, Attorney Mooney, so from process, there could potentially be two reconciliations. One reconciliation in May when we know what the city is doing, and maybe another reconciliation in June after the state passes their budget? Or is there an advice to just,
No, I think that's a fair description. You have to deal with the situation as it presents itself. And so you'll know more after the city adopts its budget, and you can take action based upon that knowledge. But then if there's a change in your assumptions relative to the state funding, then you would have an opportunity to make further adjustments.
thank you.
And in my role as chair, I was going to request superintendent that you provide the dates and timelines as you have it for the city making their decision and the state making their decision to Ms. Santiago and to the board, because I'm thinking we need to begin to plan and get some meetings on the calendar for reconciliation. So I think we need to plan to have those meetings and have them in our calendar. So when we get there, it's not a surprise, but we already have it planned.
I have to ask another question. So through you, Board Member Walker,
Yes.
and it might be a Tom Mooney question. Knowing that the $5 million is an assumption, does that mean that we now have to go back and identify what that $5 million is earmarked toward, and also have conversations with those that would be impacted? Because at the moment we don't have the funds.
I see that as more of a business judgment. You have to decide what the probabilities are. You just along the process, and you've raised an interesting point, which is the state funds are allocated for specific purposes, and so those then if the state funds don't come through, the board would have to decide whether to cut those items or to save those items, because notwithstanding the lack of state funding, you think they're more important than other items. It's really a balancing act.
And to follow that, yes, this is why they are already included as an assumption, and separate from the 6.7. Right, the 6.7 are that they matter significantly as to the board chair's comment earlier. But what we were prioritizing the most, for lack of a better way of saying it, is the core business, which is in the classrooms and supporting that. So I think I just answered my own question. It just makes me very uneasy that right, there's yet another uncertainty, given not just more so the federal dynamics that worry me as to the impact that it can have at the state level. Thank you, Board Member Walker.
Yeah, and Superintendent, I will get back to you. It appears that we can talk about the uncertainty. I guess I'm asking you, I wouldn't know who in particular to talk to in the district, because it's too uncertain to know where the shortfall is exactly going to arrive. I don't envy your position, but I was at a meeting recently with Speaker Ritter was talking to different community advocates and so forth. And he made a similar kind of point that he made promises, but then said that, well, there's some uncertainties that may adjust what I'm promising. And so, yeah, I'm just suggesting that maybe we need to have similar conversations, that there's some uncertainties and people just need to know and be honest with them that there's some uncertainties. We're projecting that we'll get it, but there's some uncertainties.
I appreciate you saying that, and I guess what the way in which I guess I will verbalize that is, right now, we know for sure what the 6.7 shortfall would mean in terms of services and programming. The 5 million placeholder, we don't, right? We would have to go back and look at the budget. And all of the other reductions that were already happening were already part of the budget development process. And decisions, right, that had already been made. I think I understand now. Thank you for allowing me to verbalize it.
No, thank you, Superintendent. I guess I would ask my fellow board members and maybe the superintendent as well, and CFO Richard, would it be some benefit after the vote next week, after the school board meeting, for us to have yet one more budget planning workshop where we scenario plan around the $5 million? Is there any virtue into us having maybe one more of those kind of sessions?
Before the board vote?
No.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
saying
gonna say,
after the board vote, because we're going to vote on what we're going to vote on. But you're asking, I guess what I'm saying, before June, because when we find out in June, there's almost no time. And so I was just wondering, is there some virtue in doing some scenario planning, let's say in the month of May, where we say, if we get the $5 million, here's what happens. If we don't get it, here's the implications. And the reason I'm saying in May, because per what you were discussing with Attorney Mooney, I think we need to get the city funding straight first to even know what our potential gaps and liabilities would be. So it'd have to be later in May, right?
I was gonna say, I think we have to have one after the city action, right? City council takes their action. And we might know before, right? I mean, we're gonna make our presentation on the 23rd. I guess, remind me again, I think a board member asked a question before. So what is the fact that you're voting with the 6.7 unaccounted for? That's the official notice to the city that there's a request? Or is it an actual letter in addition to? Like an official communication to say, this is our budget and it's missing 6.7 and we're asking you for it. Is that what I'm hearing? Or is it implied in?
Attorney Mooney, I'm thinking the term budget estimate, I thought captured that, but
And I only ask because in the past we have presented with right mitigations and the estimates that doesn't show all the money, that we don't have all the money, and there was never an understanding that we were asking for more money. There was only one time that I asked officially very early on in my tenure in writing, and so.
It is a budget estimate. Different people can have different opinions as to what a reasonable projection is. I think you have a good handle on it, but that's not part of the process. Your process is to submit a budget estimate the city's process is to make an appropriation.
Apologies. Board Member Tatum, followed by Board Member Fortune.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, that presenting the estimate, and we can be clear that there's this 6.7 million that funds these programs that we do not have an accounted revenue source for, and that alone, constitutes a kind of request. We can show them the books and explain everything that we've done. We're still short the $6.7 million, but we deem that this is essential for carrying out our mission. There's where we're at. So that makes sense to me. And there wouldn't be a need for an additional sort of letter or direct request to the city to come up with it in any particular way.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Tatum. Board Member Fortune.
Thank you. I think Mr. Tatum and I might be saying the same thing, although it might sound like I'm saying something different. I do think we should explicitly state we're seeking that they close this funding gap that we have. I think that's just better communication. So that way it's not misinterpreted in any ways. In terms of how we substantiate why we're requesting these additional funds, I don't think we need to do additional work. I think we can literally just show them all the programs that are quite vital and essential that wouldn't be cut without those essential funds. But I would say a cover page, a 1-page letter explaining this is why we need the city to cover this budget gap that we have. I would consider that essential. So that would be my preference.
Thank you, Board Member Fortune. I'm hoping Superintendent and CFO Richard, that gives you some clarification that it appears that it's okay to share our mitigation ideas in addition to the budget, or if requested, if needed.
Oh, that is always included in our presentation. It was just the added, like making the implicit explicit here with, and I heard a 1-pager.
So if there are no further questions, this has actually been this has been a really good meeting. I think we got some things accomplished. I think Attorney Mooney, thank you for attending. It certainly clarified, I think, for several of us, the actual budget process, and that is actually a 2-step process where there's an estimate and then there's a reconciled budget at the end. If there's no other comments or questions, I would say our next meeting is next Tuesday, and if there are comments or questions that you have, certainly forward it to the chair and maybe to the superintendent and her staff. If there's a detailed question about the budget that you may still maybe lingering in your head. So beyond that, thank you for attending and being part of this meeting. And the meeting's adjourned.